What's up, guys? So today I'm going to be finishing up this KX85 bottom end build that I've had sitting around for a while. I just recently replaced the main crank bearings in this bottom end and was able to reuse the crank as well with inspect. The rod bearings were good, so we were able to reuse that, just replace the main bearings and the seals in the bottom end. As we were putting it back together, I realized that I wasn't going to be able to reuse some of the parts that I had with this setup, so I'm going to have to replace them today, and that's the whole point of this video. The story on this is that it actually is built from two different parts engines that I was able to pick up for KX85 that I got that didn't have an engine. And I was going to build one engine out of them. And funny thing is that whenever I got this thing, it was a Frankenstein of parts, but the craziest thing, and that's what we're here to fix today, is that the shift lever was welded to the shift shaft. So I was hoping I might be able to get away with reusing those. We reassembled it and everything, but just between the gears on the shift shaft and some of the leftover metal that's on the shaft, I know this is the Kickstarter shaft, but I'm just pointing at it for reference. We weren't able to actually mount the shift lever onto it. So we've got a new OEM shift shaft that we're gonna put on here today, along with a Tusk shift lever that we're gonna install. And then in addition to that, the Kickstarter shaft was also not compatible with the shift lever that came with it. And the other shift shaft that came with it was, guess what? It was welded originally at some point by somebody or something, because it had been grinded on and it wasn't going to be usable either. So ordered a used shift shaft from eBay that should work with this. It's actually the type that threads in rather than the type that screws on, which is good because this shift lever was not compatible with the shaft that I had, and that's the main reason that we're replacing it. We're putting this used one on that has threads, and we've got a new OEM Kawasaki bolt screw that we're going to install into there as well. So we're going to install that, get both of these good to go, and we'll do the top end whenever the cylinder gets back. All right, so first thing we're going to do is go ahead and take these inner clutch cover bolts out. Already got them broken loose, so we're going to remove all of these. They're all the same size, so it doesn't matter which order they go in. If you're doing crankcase bolts or anything else, any other inner clutch cover or anything that's got different size bolts, it's best just to draw an outline on a scrap piece of cardboard, like a rough outline of it, and then just kind of indicate where the holes are going to be, punch the screws through it, and that's a little hack to be able to keep track of where they're going to go. If you don't do that, at least take the time to bag them up and label them. I'm not going to have to here because we're only going to have it off for just a few seconds. So, and they're all the same size anyways. So these will just go in my magnetic pan until they're ready to go back in. I'm gonna take the water pump cover off as well, because on these KX85s, the water pump gear is actually stuck behind another gear, so you can't pull it off with the cover. So once this cover comes off, you can take the impeller out. Set that right there. It looks like on this one you do have to remove the clutch in order to be able to pull off the gear for the Kickstarter shaft. Just gonna hold the crank still, break these bolts loose. All right, I got some gloves on. I got the impact out, clutch holder tool, and torque wrenches that are set up for 1/4 inch drive and 1/2 inch drive for the clutch nut and the clutch springs when they go back on. I didn't realize that you were gonna have to take the clutch hub completely out to get the Kickstarter shaft and gear out. So we'll go ahead and try to remove those with the impact first, and then by hand if that doesn't work. That way we can get to this this Kickstarter shaft. Old Kickstarter shaft. Now we're going to swap out our Kickstarter or our shift shaft with our new OEM Kawasaki one. This spring and installing it's pretty tough because it's so fragile. I've stretched a couple of them and broken them trying to stretch them on there. Just kind of takes a little bit of practice to get it right. It's really important when you install those Kickstarter shafts that you make sure that the collar, the plastic bushing that works as a spring guide sits on there correctly. And this one doesn't have a washer on it, but you gotta make sure that you check because some of them are supposed to. I've had a few that were missing a washer that caused issues with the inner clutch cover pushing the shaft back far enough to seal during install. And then you just got to make sure with these Kickstarter or these shift shafts that both of the collars or bushings, whatever you want to call them, on the inside and outside are properly installed before you put everything back together. I don't like the fact on this engine that you have to take the clutch out to be able to change the shift or the Kickstarter shaft because of the gear that's on the back of it. But it is nice that you can take the shift shaft out without having to take not only the clutch, but even the shift star out of the motor. On my KX250, it's actually got a second portion of the shift shaft that sits over the top of it and the screw goes into, and you have to remove that to be able to put your shift shaft in and then put that back onto it. So it's just an extra step. You got to torque that down right and Loctite it when it goes on. And thankfully you don't have to do it with this one because it just slides right over. Just like so. And these little pins allow it to shift. A lot of people will stick a penny, some kind of soft metal in between the gears for this part, and you can do that. It won't hurt nothing, but it's just nice to be able to use the tool. The whole purpose of the KX85 build, it's something I've been sitting on for quite a while. I had access to an 85 for parts that had a blown bottom in at one point, and we weren't able to find where the original engine was for it, but it was given to me for free as a parts bike. And I just couldn't stand to see it just sitting there, perfectly good frame and suspension with nothing in it. So I just kept my eyes open for a while, reached out on the Facebook groups and everything, and I eventually found a set of 2 bottom ends that were blown up with one top end that was also in a bad way. And I've been sitting on those for a year or two and finally got around to deciding it was time to get started on this after I finished my KX250 build. So the goal with this was to get it back together, do a pretty cost-effective and cheap build, freshen it up as much as we could, give the frame a coat of paint, and put it back together and use it to kind of fund some of the other projects that we've got going on or that we're about getting ready to start. So that was kind of the idea behind it. So I'm really hoping that this project turns out well, especially without spending too much money. It makes a good bike for somebody. do have to actually hold the crank still while you get these tight. Torque is light enough that it shouldn't be an issue to do that. Or you could do the penny trick that we talked about earlier. All right, so we're almost done. I had to double check the orientation for the power valve for a second. You just want to make sure that the dot that's on it lines up with the mark that's on the side of the clutch cover before you tighten it completely down, and I just wanted to double check that and make sure it was right. Now everything's back together. Clutch is where it needs to be. All I've got left to do is to install the Kickstarter lever that I had. Test it. Just to make sure that that shaft is installed properly, and it is. All right. And we want to make sure that we install our bolt for it. We're going to apply a little bit of Loctite. You don't want to lose your kick lever in the middle of a ride, do you? I don't. And on this little 85, it shouldn't take more torque than I can put on with this. So that's about as tight as I need to get it. I'm really happy that that worked out. And we're going to spin this engine stand around and install the shift lever. High performance, adds at least 10 horsepower. And this may end up having to come back off when it goes into the frame. Neutral. First. And the way I'm testing that is that whenever I'm in gear, the sprocket is not moving, with the exception of just a few inches of travel. It's not moving independently of the crankshaft, and you have to kind of move the crank while you test the shifting. So pop it back into neutral, and I'm not sure if you guys can see this, but the sprocket will completely turn independently. So, and you can feel the difference in the resistance as you get into the gear. Second, third, fourth, fifth. And there you can see it's much easier to turn that sprocket by hand. Back into first, and back into neutral. So it works well. I'm probably going to need to adjust the position of this once it's back on the bike, but I just wanted to go ahead and get it installed. There's our completed KX85 bottom end. I'm waiting on the top end to show up. It should be in the mail tomorrow. I just got it overboard one size, and I've got a new piston for it. So we got a fresh top end. We'll clean it up real quick just to make sure there's not any debris left from the machine shop in it, and we'll install it whenever it gets here tomorrow. Torque it all down, check compression, and go ahead and install the reeds. Appreciate you guys watching.